I stared at Clay in disbelief as the words left his mouth. Marla, we're done. I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce. The fork clattered against my plate, the sound echoing in the tense silence that followed. We'd been together for 15 years, and while our marriage had its ups and downs, I never expected this sudden bombshell. What are you talking about? I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Clay's expression remained stoic, his eyes devoid of the warmth I'd once loved. We've grown apart, Marla. The grief of not having children has taken its toll, and I can't keep pretending everything is fine. I flinched at his words, the old wounds reopening. We'd tried for years, enduring countless treatments and disappointments, but in the end, it wasn't meant to be. It had been a difficult journey, but I thought we were stronger for having gone through it together. That's not a reason to throw away our marriage, I protested, my hands trembling. We've been through so much, Clay. Don't make a rash decision you'll regret. He shook his head, his jaw set in determination. My mind is made up. I've already spoken to a lawyer and started the paperwork. It's over, Marla. A sinking feeling gripped my stomach as I realized this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment outburst. Clay had been planning this, and the finality in his tone chilled me to the bone. Why? I whispered, searching his eyes for any trace of the man I'd fallen in love with. After everything we've been through, how can you just give up on us? For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a flicker of emotion cross his features, but it was gone as quickly as it came. Sometimes people grow apart, and there's nothing left to hold on to. I'm sorry, Marla, but this is the way it has to be. I wanted to scream, to beg him to reconsider, but the words stuck in my throat. Deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Clay's reasons didn't add up, and a nagging suspicion took root in my mind. As he pushed back his chair and left the room, I sat there, numb and disbelieving. Our life together, the dreams we'd shared, all crumbling before my eyes. But beneath the pain and heartache, a new emotion began to stir. Determination. If Clay thought I was going to let him walk away without a fight, he was sorely mistaken. I would get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. And if he wanted a war, I would give him one he couldn't win. The following week, I found myself seated across from a grizzled private investigator named Frank in his dingy office. The air reeked of stale coffee and cigarette smoke, but I barely noticed as I laid out the details of Clay's betrayal. I need you to dig into my soon-to-be ex-husband's life, I said, sliding an envelope stuffed with cash towards him. He's up to something, and I want to know what it is. Frank raised a bushy eyebrow but pocketed the money without a word. You got it, Mrs. Benson. I'll get my guys on it right away. True to his word, Frank didn't disappoint. Within a few days, he had uncovered a sordid trail of lies and deception. Clay had been having an affair with a younger woman from his office, Elise Turner, barely out of college. We got photos, recordings, the whole 9 yards, Frank said as he spread out the damning evidence before me. Looks like your hubby's been playing you for a fool. My heart sank as I sifted through the incriminating materials, but a part of me wasn't surprised. Clay's behavior had been growing increasingly erratic, and now I knew why. The man I had loved and supported for over a decade had been sleeping with some young tramp behind my back. That bastard, I muttered, clenching my fists. He's not going to get away with this. Frank leaned back in his chair, eyeing me warily. What are you going to do, Mrs. Benson? This is some heavy stuff. I met his gaze, my resolve unwavering. Whatever it takes. Clay wanted a divorce? Fine, but he's not going to walk away with half of everything we built while he sets up a cozy little life with his mistress. The PI nodded slowly, seeming to understand the depths of my determination. All right, then. Just say the word, and I'm your guy. Over the next few weeks, I pored over the evidence, meticulously putting together a picture of Clay's grand deception. It wasn't just about the affair. He had been siphoning funds, hiding assets, and plotting to leave me high and dry while he rode off into the sunset with Elise. The more I uncovered, the angrier I became. All those years of standing by his side, supporting him through thick and thin, and this was how he repaid me? By stabbing me in the back and stealing from me? If he wants a war, I'll give him one he can't win, I seethed, slamming my fist on the table. Frank raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. He knew better than to get in my way when I was like this. With each new revelation, my determination grew stronger. Clay had made a grave mistake in underestimating me. I was going to expose his lies, dismantle his plans, and make sure he paid dearly for his betrayal. It was time to take the gloves off and fight for what was rightfully mine. With Frank's help, I began laying the groundwork for my counterattack. First, I reached out to my network of trusted friends and colleagues, carefully assembling a team to assist me in exposing Clay's duplicity. "You can count on me, Marla," my old friend Jenna assured me over coffee. "That snake won't know what hit him." Next, I turned my attention to our finances. As a skilled financial analyst, I knew every inch of our accounts and investments like the back of my hand. Clay might have thought he was being clever by hiding assets, but I was always one step ahead. "Mrs. Benson, these records show your husband has been diverting funds into offshore accounts for months," my accountant confirmed, her brow furrowed with concern. I simply nodded, unsurprised by the revelation. "Don't worry, I'm on top of it. Keep digging. I want every last detail." With each new piece of evidence, my anger burned hotter. Clay's deception ran deeper than I could have imagined, but I refused to let him get away with it. Meanwhile, Frank kept me updated on Clay's movements. "Your hubby's been whining and dining that little side piece like there's no tomorrow," he reported. "Looks like he's already making plans for their future together." I clenched my jaw, fighting back the surge of fury. Well, we'll just see about that. Putting the final pieces together, I realized Clay intended to blindside me with a quickie divorce, leaving me with next to nothing while he rode off into the sunset with Elise and my hard-earned money. "Not a chance in hell," I growled, slamming my fist on the table. "That lowlife is about to learn a very painful lesson." With everything in place, I began setting the trap. I arranged a family gathering, inviting Clay under the guise of one last attempt at reconciliation. Little did he know, it would be the beginning of his downfall. The night of the gathering, I greeted him with a warm smile, playing the part of the devoted wife to perfection. Clay, the arrogant fool, never suspected a thing. As our relatives and friends gathered around, I waited for the perfect moment. When Clay took a sip of his drink, I cleared my throat, my expression hardening. "Everyone, I have something to share with you all," I announced, holding up a manila envelope. "It seems my dear husband has been keeping some secrets from me." Clay's eyes widened as I began pulling out the evidence: photos, recordings, bank statements. With each damning revelation, his face grew paler. "This is the woman you've been sleeping with behind my back," I spat, tossing a photo of Elise onto the table. "And this is how you've been stealing from me to fund your little affair." The room fell deathly silent as our friends and family looked on in shock and disgust. Clay opened his mouth, but no words came out. I leaned forward, my gaze boring into his. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I'd just roll over and let you walk all over me?" His silence was all the answer I needed. I turned to face our stunned guests. "This is the man you all know and love," I said, my voice dripping with contempt. "A liar, a cheat, and a thief. But mark my words, he won't get away with it. Not this time." As I looked around at the sea of appalled faces, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The war had begun, and Clay had no idea what was coming. The fallout from the family gathering was swift and brutal. Clay tried to deny everything at first, but the evidence was overwhelming. He had no choice but to admit to his despicable actions. "How could you do this to us?" my sister Sarah demanded, tears streaming down her face. "After everything Marla sacrificed for you?" Clay hung his head in shame, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Even our oldest friends turned their backs on him, disgusted by his betrayal. As for Elise, the naive little homewrecker was nowhere to be found. Apparently, she had gotten cold feet and fled the moment the truth came to light. "Coward," I muttered under my breath. "She's just as guilty as he is." In the days that followed, I wasted no time in taking the next step. With the full weight of the evidence and public opinion on my side, I filed for divorce, ensuring Clay would get exactly what he deserved. "We're going to bleed him dry," my lawyer, Jessica, stated matter-of-factly. "He won't have a penny left to his name when we're done." I nodded, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. After everything he had put me through, Clay was finally going to pay the price. The legal proceedings were a brutal affair, with both sides flinging accusations and counterclaims. Clay tried to play the victim, claiming I had entrapped him and violated his privacy. Your Honor, my client was simply a man struggling with the emotional burden of infertility, his lawyer argued. Mrs. Benson's actions were nothing short of vindictive and cruel. I scoffed out loud, drawing glares from the opposing counsel. As if his philandering had anything to do with our inability to have children. It was just another lie, another excuse to justify his selfish actions. When it was my turn, I didn't hold back. With Jessica's guidance, I methodically laid out every sordid detail of Clay's betrayal, from the affair to the hidden assets and offshore accounts. Mr. Benson thought he could cheat me out of my rightful share of our marital assets, I stated, my voice unwavering. He believed he could discard me like yesterday's trash and ride off into the sunset with his young mistress, all while leaving me destitute. Clay shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unable to meet my accusing stare. Well, he was wrong, I continued, slamming my fist on the table for emphasis. I won't sit idly by while he destroys everything we built together over the past 15 years. He needs to be held accountable for his actions. As the proceedings dragged on, it became increasingly clear that Clay's case was crumbling. The evidence against him was simply too overwhelming, and his attempts at playing the victim fell flat. Finally, after weeks of bitter legal battles, the judge delivered his ruling. I'll never forget the look on Clay's face as the verdict was read, a potent mix of shock, anger, and fear. Mr. Benson, in light of the overwhelming evidence presented, I have no choice but to grant Mrs. Benson's demands in full, the judge declared, his voice stern. You will relinquish all claims to your shared assets and pay punitive damages for your fraudulent financial activities. I couldn't help but smile as Clay slumped in his chair, utterly defeated. It was over. I had won, and he had lost everything. As I stepped out of the courthouse, the weight of the past few months finally hit me. It had been a long, brutal road, but in the end, justice had prevailed. Clay stood nearby, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The once arrogant, self-assured man was now a mere shadow of his former self, stripped of his wealth and dignity. I hope it was worth it, I said, unable to resist twisting the knife one final time. Because you've lost everything. He glared at me, his eyes burning with impotent rage. You're a vindictive witch, Marla. I'll make sure you pay for this. I let out a derisive laugh. Save it, Clay. You have nothing left to threaten me with. Your little mistress has abandoned you, your assets are gone, and your reputation is in tatters. You're finished. His jaw clenched, but he remained silent, knowing I was right. In his arrogance, he had underestimated me at every turn, and now he was paying the ultimate price. I gave you everything, Clay, I continued, my voice thick with emotion. I stood by you through thick and thin, supported you when no one else would, and this is how you repaid me. With lies, betrayal, and outright theft. He flinched at my words. But I wasn't done. You thought you could just discard me like yesterday's trash and ride off into the sunset with that little tramp. Well, think again. I may have lost my husband, but I'll be damned if I let you take my dignity and self-respect as well. Turning on my heel, I strode away, leaving him to stew in his own misery. Jessica fell into step beside me, a satisfied smile on her face. Well played, Marla, she said, clapping me on the shoulder. That smug bastard never saw it coming. I allowed myself a small grin. He brought this on himself. I just made sure he got what was coming to him. In the days and weeks that followed, the full extent of Clay's downfall became apparent. With his finances in ruin and his reputation destroyed, he was swiftly cast out of polite society. Even his own family wanted nothing to do with him after learning the truth. As for Elise, the little homewrecker resurfaced briefly, only to slink away in disgrace when she realized Clay was broke and had no future to offer her. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction at her disgrace. Slowly but surely, I began to rebuild my life, free from the weight of Clay's betrayal. With my financial security intact and a newfound sense of purpose, I threw myself into my work and reconnected with old friends. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when the pain of everything threatened to overwhelm me. But I remained resolute, drawing strength from the knowledge that I had emerged victorious in the end. As I looked back on that tumultuous chapter of my life, I realized that sometimes the only way to move forward was to burn everything to the ground and start anew. Clay had forced my hand, and in doing so, he had sealed his own fate. I had lost a husband, but in the process, I had regained my self-respect and agency. And for that, I would be forever grateful, no matter the cost. The courtroom was thick with tension as the final round of legal proceedings commenced. Clay sat across the aisle, his expression a mask of barely contained fury. "Your Honor, the evidence we have presented clearly shows that Mr. Benson engaged in a pattern of deceit and fraudulent financial activities," Jessica stated, her voice ringing out. "He willfully concealed assets, diverted funds, and intended to leave my client destitute." I watched as Clay's lawyer whispered furiously in his ear, no doubt trying to formulate a defense. But it was too late. We had them cornered. "Furthermore," Jessica continued, "we have uncovered proof that Mr. Benson misappropriated company funds and engaged in insider trading to further his own personal agenda." A murmur rippled through the gallery as Jessica presented the damning evidence: bank statements, emails, financial records. Clay's calm facade began to crumble as the weight of his misdeeds came crashing down. "You lying bitch!" he exploded, surging to his feet. "You're making this all up!" The judge pounded his gavel, restoring order. "Mr. Benson, control yourself or I'll have you removed from this courtroom." Clay's lawyer tugged at his sleeve, urging him to sit, but the damage was done. His outburst had only further cemented the perception of his guilt. As the proceedings continued, more and more of Clay's shady dealings came to light. It wasn't just about the affair or the hidden assets. He had been systematically defrauding me and his employer for years, all to fund his lavish lifestyle and future with Elise. I watched as the realization dawned on his face. He had badly miscalculated. In his arrogance and greed, he had left a trail of breadcrumbs a mile wide, and I had followed every last one. When it was my turn to take the stand, I met Clay's gaze head-on, unflinching. "Your Honor, for 15 years, I stood by this man's side, supporting him through thick and thin," I stated, my voice steady. "I sacrificed my own dreams and ambitions to build a life with him, only to have it all torn away by his selfishness and deceit." Clay's jaw clenched, but he remained silent, knowing any outburst would only further damage his case. "He betrayed my trust, my love, and my loyalty in the worst possible way," I continued. "And when I fought to regain what was rightfully mine, he doubled down on his lies and illegal activities." I gestured towards the mountain of evidence piled on the table. "These documents speak for themselves. Clay Benson is a liar, a cheat, and a criminal. He has shown no remorse for his actions, and he clearly has no intention of changing his ways. It's time for him to face the consequences of his choices." As I stepped down from the stand, I caught a glimpse of Clay's face, a twisted mask of rage and impotent fury. In that moment, I knew I had won. He had gambled everything and lost spectacularly. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. "In light of the overwhelming evidence presented, I have no choice but to rule in favor of Mrs. Benson," he declared, his voice grave. "Mr. Benson, you have been found guilty of fraud, embezzlement, and a litany of other financial crimes. You will be stripped of all remaining assets and face potential criminal charges." Clay slumped in his chair, utterly broken. The once smug, arrogant man was now a mere shell, his grand schemes and delusions of a new life with Elise shattered beyond repair. As the courtroom cleared, I couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction. It may have been a Pyrrhic victory, but at least justice had been served. Clay had proven himself to be a master manipulator and con artist, but in the end, his hubris and greed had been his undoing. He had underestimated me at every turn, and now he was paying the ultimate price for his sins. The scene outside the courthouse was pandemonium. Reporters swarmed Clay like vultures, shoving microphones in his face and peppering him with questions. "Mr. Benson, how do you respond to the allegations of fraud and embezzlement? Care to comment on the judge's ruling stripping you of your assets?" Clay battled his way through the throng, his expression a mask of barely contained fury. I watched from a distance, savoring every moment of his humiliation. As he reached the bottom of the courthouse steps, a familiar figure caught my eye. Elise. The little homewrecker had resurfaced, no doubt hoping to latch on to Clay's coattails now that the legal battles were over. "Clay," she called out, pushing her way towards him. "Baby, it's going to be okay. We can get through this together." Clay turned towards her, his face twisting into an ugly sneer. "Get away from me, you stupid bitch. Can't you see it's over?" Elise recoiled as if struck, her pretty features crumpling in confusion and hurt. But, you said we'd be together. You promised. A harsh laugh erupted from Clay's throat. Promised? You actually believe that nonsense? I was just using you as a way to get out of my marriage. Now that I'm broke and facing criminal charges, you're useless to me. The words hung in the air like a slap. Elise's mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged. Finally, she turned and fled, disappearing into the crowd as quickly as she had appeared. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction at her anguish. She had been just as complicit in Clay's schemes as he was, a willing accomplice in exchange for the promise of being his sugar baby. Now she was left with nothing. As for Clay, the full weight of his downfall was finally setting in. He stood amidst the chaos, alone and disgraced, stripped of everything he had schemed and lied to obtain. Well, look at the mighty Clay Benson now, a voice called out. I turned to see Frank, the private investigator, sauntering over with a smug grin on his weathered face. Seems like your big plans didn't quite pan out, did they? He taunted. Guess you should have thought twice before messing with Mrs. Benson. Clay's jaw clenched, but he remained silent, knowing any retort would only further fuel the humiliation. Frank clapped me on the shoulder. You did good, kiddo. That scumbag got exactly what was coming to him. I nodded, watching as Clay was finally led away by a pair of stern-faced officers. His tailored suit and designer shoes were a far cry from the orange jumpsuit that awaited him. As the crowd began to disperse, I took a moment to let everything sink in. It was finally over. The lies, the betrayal, the legal battles. I had emerged victorious, but at what cost? Clay had taken so much from me, my trust, my sense of security, my dreams for the future we had once shared. But in the end, his greed and arrogance had been his undoing. It seems you lost much more than just a wife, Clay, I murmured to myself as his sleek sedan disappeared around the corner. A chapter of my life had closed, painful but necessary. Now it was time to begin anew, to rebuild and reclaim the life he had tried so desperately to take from me. As I turned and made my way towards my own car, I couldn't help but feel a sense of grim satisfaction. Clay had made his bed, and now he was lying in it, alone, disgraced, and utterly defeated. It was a hollow victory, to be sure, but at least I could finally move forward, free from the weight of his betrayal, and secure in the knowledge that justice had been served. 6 months had passed since the dramatic courtroom showdown, and my life had undergone a complete transformation. Gone were the opulent trappings of my former existence with Clay, the sprawling mansion, the designer clothes, the luxury cars. In their place was a modest but cozy townhouse, a fresh start unburdened by the ghosts of my past. Marla, this looks perfect, Sarah exclaimed as she helped me arrange the last of the knickknacks on the mantelpiece. I can't believe how quickly you've managed to turn this place into a home. I smiled, surveying the warm, inviting space we had created. It's exactly what I needed, a clean slate, without any lingering reminders of him. Sarah nodded knowingly. She had been my rock throughout the entire ordeal, a constant source of support and strength when I felt like the world was crashing down around me. You know, I'm really proud of you, she said softly. Not just for standing up to that jackass, but for picking yourself up and starting over. It can't have been easy. A lump formed in my throat as I pulled her into a hug. I couldn't have done it without you. You and the rest of our family. You never gave up on me, even when I was at my lowest. She squeezed me tightly before pulling back, her eyes shining with unshed tears. That's what family is for, right? Now, come on, enough of this sappy stuff. We've got a housewarming party to get ready for. The gathering that evening was a joyous affair, filled with laughter, good food, and even better company. Old friends mingled seamlessly with new acquaintances, united in their celebration of my fresh beginning. To Marla, Jenna said, raising her glass in a toast. The strongest, most resilient woman I know, here's to leaving the past behind and embracing the future. A chorus of cheers and clinking glasses filled the air as I basked in the warmth and support of those around me. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was truly, blissfully happy. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into rebuilding my life with a renewed sense of purpose. I invested in a small business venture, using my financial skills to help turn it into a flourishing success. The work was challenging, but rewarding, providing me with a much-needed sense of accomplishment and independence. "You're really killing it, you know that?" Frank commented one evening over drinks. "Half the folks in this town are singing your praises these days." I couldn't help but preen a little at the compliment, a far cry from the broken woman he had first encountered all those months ago. "Well, I figured if I could take down a sleazeball like Clay, running a small business would be a piece of cake," I quipped, earning a hearty laugh from the grizzled PI. As my professional life thrived, my personal life also began to blossom in unexpected ways. A handsome new client named Daniel had caught my eye, and after a few tentative coffee dates, I found myself genuinely looking forward to our meetings. "You seem different lately," Sarah observed one evening as we shared a bottle of wine. "Happier, more like your old self again." I smiled, feeling a warmth bloom in my chest. I think I'm finally ready to move on, to open my heart again. Clay did his damnedest to break me, but in the end, he only made me stronger. Sarah reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "I'm so glad to hear that. You deserve to be happy, Marla. Truly, blissfully happy." As the months rolled by, I found myself settling into a new normal, one free from the toxic weight of Clay's betrayal. The pain and anguish of our divorce had faded, replaced by a sense of hard-won peace and contentment. On the one-year anniversary of my fresh start, I hosted a celebratory dinner party, surrounded by the incredible people who had helped me navigate those darkest of days. As I looked around the table at their smiling faces, I couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude. "Sometimes, starting over is the best outcome," I said, raising my glass. "To new beginnings, and the strength to forge our own paths, no matter the obstacles." The toast was met with resounding cheers and clinking glasses, a testament to the indomitable human spirit. We had all weathered our own storms, emerging battered but unbroken on the other side. As the evening drew to a close and my guests began to depart, I took a moment to savor the peace and tranquility of my new life. The road had been long and arduous, but in the end, I had prevailed, over Clay's deceit, over my own doubts and insecurities, over the demons that had threatened to consume me. I was a survivor, a fighter, a woman reborn from the ashes of betrayal. And as I looked towards the future, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them head-on, fortified by the strength and resilience that had carried me through my darkest hour.